as she mentioned, I work for GEF Seniors Housing. Just a little bit about my role and my responsibility for the seniors in my organization is to ensure that there are opportunities for our seniors to connect and engage in meaningful ways. I am responsible for supervising our activity and wellness staff across the organization and supporting them with creating programs, facilitating programs, and making sure that there are opportunities all the time. Even in the climate that we are in, this is a vital topic to be talking about. Working through a global pandemic where we are almost demanded and encouraged to isolate, we all still recognize the crucialness of engaging and staying connected, especially now. So it's a really great topic to be talking about during the time that we're in. So before I get into it, I'll just share just a really quick agenda of the things I'm going to be talking about. To start off, my topic title includes the word congregate living. So we're going to first establish, what does congregate living look like and what kind of opportunities are there in congregate living itself to connect. We're going to talk about activities within congregate living and that are produced by activity and wellness staff that are ways that you can connect and engage. And, we're going to talk about strategies outside of the community. So even though you live in a congregate setting, perhaps, what can you do outside of that building and how can you connect with people outside, even now during the pandemic? So, as I talk about congregate living, I probably will speak to my own organization and GEF because it's the experience and what I can pull on. So I am going to pull up some slides here. If you are tuning in by phone, I will still be talking through it as we go, so you'll be able to know exactly what's on the screen. So next up, talking about GEF. So just some quick facts about congregate living in GEF Seniors Housing. We are a registered charity and we're the largest provider for subsidized seniors housing in Alberta. We have over 40 buildings in Edmonton and currently house almost 4,000 seniors. Our buildings are a variety of housing programs, and so I'm going to talk about those in a minute here of what different congregate living settings can look like. Our buildings are meant to be safe, secure, and affordable. So we are geared towards low-income housing and seniors who can afford subsidized and prove eligibility through income. So I'm going to talk about those housing programs. So if you are in congregate living, there's a wide variety of what congregate living could look like. It could be anywhere from long-term care, assisted living, supportive living, apartments. So GEF offers two main housing programs, the first being our lodge program. So on the slide here, it just talks a little bit about what the lodge program looks like. It's considered supportive living. So that means seniors who are still independent and able to maintain control of their lives and their decisions while getting some supports for things they need. Some of those services and supports could include 24-hour staffing, safe, secure buildings, emergency response buttons in the units, just in case you have a fall or there's an emergency that you need to contact somebody. There's 3 meals a day provided where you would come down and eat in the dining room. And there's snacks, tea, coffee, juice available, usually 24/7, in case you're a night owl. And there is housekeeping once a week with linen and towel changeover. And lastly, one of the services that is my area of expertise is the activity and wellness program that's offered in the lodges. Individuals in the lodge can utilize supports and services, things like home care that you might get if you're living in your own home or an apartment in the community. So those kind of supports are still available as needed. Now, touching on the lodge program in itself is a even in itself is a great way to connect. If you're somebody who lives in your own home or even an apartment in the community, sometimes it's difficult to connect with people, especially now when you are supposed to be reducing how much you see people, and maybe people aren't coming to see you as often. And so, being in a lodge setting, you are you are required to see people 3 times a day at minimum because you come down for meals. So, meals in itself are a great way to see others, connect with somebody across the table, and have a conversation while you're eating your breakfast, lunch, or supper. Granted, usually our tables host 4 at a time. Right now, there might only be 2 just for physical distancing reasons, but it's still somebody that you can engage with. Lodge programs and buildings often have a variety of common areas as well. These common areas are ways where you can connect and sit down with neighbors in the building and get to know somebody who may live on the same floor as you or nearby. And that way you can find somebody that you can connect with in your own community, in your own site. The next program I'm going to talk about is apartment programs. Apartment programs are an even more independent congregate living setting than lodge. It's really an apartment style accommodation geared towards seniors who are living independently. So, in these settings, individuals who live here are sometimes still working part time. They would cook their own meals and maintain their units in a clean way. These individuals may still have home care services provided to them from the community as needed. In GEF in particular, we have 2 different types of apartment programs. One being subsidized, where rent would be calculated based on your annual income, and it would be 30%, and that would make up your base rent. These individuals applying for the subsidized program would have to show their income and prove eligibility under a certain threshold. Affordable program of apartments is still a very great way to live in an apartment that is cheaper than market range, usually about 10 to 15% below. And that way, it's a little bit more affordable for our seniors living on a lower income. This particular program is still buildings that often have common areas. So if you're someone living in an apartment, being available in a common area and meeting your neighbors is a great way to just connect and be engaged. It's important to get to know people around you, especially when you might need something. I mean, even in the climate that we're in with the pandemic, you can still engage in common areas in a safe way. You could wear a mask, you can make sure that your hands are washed or sanitized, and you could stay seating 6 feet apart. The next I'm going to talk about is the role of activity and wellness staff. So I'm speaking largely from the perspective of GEF seniors housing, but if you're someone or if you have a family member who lives in congregate living, if it is seniors housing, I am confident that somewhere in that organization or building, there is usually an activity and wellness staff. They may be called something different, have a different title. It could be a recreation therapist or a recreation coordinator or a recreation aide. Lots of different titles. But really, ultimately, this staff member's role is to assess the engagement needs of the residents in those buildings and identify strategies to meeting those needs through activity and wellness programming. These staff members are focused on creating programs that reach all of our seniors in a holistic way. When I say holistic, I mean trying to approach the dimensions of wellness. It's possible that you've heard of the dimensions of wellness. There's usually a few different criteria for these, and sometimes there's 7, sometimes there's 8, sometimes there's 6 dimensions of wellness. In my particular organization, and what I encourage my staff to focus on, is 4 dimensions of wellness in particular. I ask them to focus mostly on social, spiritual, physical, and intellectual well being. So when activity and wellness staff produce programming and often produce an activity calendar for the entire month, they make sure that there's a variety of programs meeting all areas of wellness so that people can approach their health in a holistic way. Now, I'm going to get into talking about these dimensions of wellness and the types of activities that correspond with them. And the reason I'm going to go into each of them individually is because although it is important to approach all areas of your wellness and be engaged in different aspects of the dimensions, it is true that all of us have certain dimensions of wellness that we resonate with most. I know for me, I have certain ones that bring me most joy and most satisfaction. And so it's important that you find which one is important to you most. So let's talk a little bit about those dimensions of wellness. The first one I'm going to talk about is social well being. Social well being is focusing on your interactions with other people. So it's creating a sense of community. It's developing ties with other people and maybe other people outside of your community and site. This is programming that activity and wellness staff create that fosters conversation. It's something that there might be something going on in the background, but really the main focus is for seniors to be able to connect with each other and converse, have conversations, socialize, get to know each other. It's probably one of the most welcoming and easy ones to approach because there's often not a whole lot of need on your part to do much. For example, these programs might be things like a coffee social, a pub night, special events, or knitting clubs. So, knitting clubs might require some skill, a skill that I do not have, but I know that knitters across our organization can just knit away without even looking at what they're doing, and they can sit 6 feet apart and socialize while they do it. At GEF in particular, our knitting clubs produce thousands of knitted items a year. And we do what's called a great knitting giveaway every October. Every October, we host an event, looked a little different this year, where our knitted items are donated to a variety of charities in Edmonton. And our seniors who participated in these clubs, really just to socialize and to do a thing that they love to do, knitting, get to give back and find an even greater sense of connection by connecting with the community that they're serving and volunteering for. So they get to hear from these charities and hear about where their knitted items go and who is so grateful for the time that they have spent knitting. So these are just a few examples of ways that you could connect and focus on your social well-being with other people. Please keep in mind that a lot of the activities I'm talking about may look different for your sites right now, and some of them may not be put on right now because of the pandemic. But that doesn't mean that there are certain activities still done in a safe way. The next area of wellness we're going to talk about is spiritual well-being. For spiritual well-being, people often associate that with a certain or particular religion. And that might be true for you, and it might be true for many, but that isn't necessarily spiritual being for all people. For spiritual well being, it's programming that allows individuals to stimulate their mind, maybe engage with culture or heritage that is important to them. Possibly it could be a religious service or programming, but it's a way that they can connect with their soul and whatever spiritual beliefs that they have. Some activities, in particular programs in GEF, are things like non denominational services, meditation, Bible study. And these programs allow you to meet people that have similar beliefs as you, which is a really vital way to build a support system in your congregate living setting. Sometimes when we are in congregate living, it's difficult to get out to certain religious services if we are not driving anymore, or it's winter time and the buses are a little bit more challenging. And you know what? cabs are expensive. So it's great to have an opportunity within your congregate living setting where you can engage in your spiritual beliefs. The third dimension of wellness that I'm going to talk about is physical well-being. So physical well-being is something that can be a little daunting for some individuals. If you're not someone who exercised your whole life or were engaged in sports and movement for a long time, it may be challenging to get on board with doing something now. But let me tell you, lots of the activities done in congregate living and produced by my activity and wellness staff are focused on very vital, crucial things to support you and your long-term health. These programs focus on improving functional endurance, strength, flexibility, and circulation, all things that are just beneficial in the long run. Programs that focus on physical well-being don't necessarily have to be your typical exercise class like the photo in my slides here with a man holding weights. It may not be that. Some of the examples I have on my slide here are seated yoga, Zumba, walking groups, or carpet curling. Different physical activities focus on different movements, and you can engage in movement without having to lift weights or do something that feels like you're exercising. You could do something fun like carpet curling, and you're doing movements that will benefit you, but get a chance to compete and have some fun with somebody else as well. The last dimension of wellness I have here is intellectual well-being. This particular dimension has activity and wellness staff creating cognitive programs designed to support and maintain memory and brain fitness. This particular dimension is usually often desired and resonates with the baby boomer generation, as they are individuals who often desire lifelong learning. The type of activities that GEF offers and are available as examples are things like trivia, short story club or poetry reading, crossword puzzles, board games. I think some of my activity and wellness coordinators run programs. They call it mind aerobics, and it's a lot of little mind games where people can feel like they're exercising their mind, which I love that they call it mind aerobics. These types of activities you might resonate with because you love to learn, you love to challenge your mind and stay thinking. So as I've talked about these, I've really just explained types of activities. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, how am I supposed to engage in that? Or should I engage in that right now? I encourage you that we are in a pandemic. You're right. And it might be challenging to reach out and connect with someone. But it is still possible to do so safely while in congregate living settings. Our seniors housing and our lodges follow very strict guidelines, but even now they are offering programming for seniors in a capacity of under 15 people and with activities that are done safely. So you may not be playing games where you're exchanging equipment where you might touch something and someone else touches something, but if you can do something where you're seated 6 feet apart, or you could wear a mask just in case, there are lots of things you can still be doing. The other thing you might be thinking about after I've talked about these is that you don't have these in your congregate living setting. And how are you supposed to engage in those if they're not there? I would encourage you to find a staff member who supports activities and wellness and speak with them about the opportunities in your building. Activity and wellness staff love to hear suggestions and they love to have support of ideas that might work for you and might benefit other people if you're the one to speak up. My next slide talks about volunteering. Volunteering in and of itself is a great way to connect with people. Activity and wellness staff are responsible for creating, producing, and often facilitating programs and activities in congregate living, but they rely heavily on volunteers. In GEF, I think we have about 1,000 volunteers across the organization annually. And about 85 to 90% of those volunteers are seniors who live in our buildings. Yes, about 900 of them are seniors, and they love to engage in their site. Engaging in your site and leading activities is a way for you to do something that you're passionate about and like doing, and you meet people that like to do it as well because you're engaged in this activity. If there's something that I talked about that you don't have in your site, bring it up with a staff member. Are you willing to lead it? Are you willing to start it? Because that is probably what someone else in your building is waiting for. Somebody else who might start it so that they can come too. Volunteering in your building is a great way that you can stay close to home in a safe way while still connecting with others, and also develop a sense of accomplishment and purpose while doing so. The next thing I'm going to talk about here is connections using technology. Terrifying sometimes, even for anybody who's engaged in technology, myself included. When I have to do something new, or a system I've never used before, or a device I've never used before, it takes some learning and it takes some getting used to. And sometimes it can be overwhelming. I encourage you to start small. Our activity and wellness staff, and I'm sure activity and wellness staff or recreation therapists near you, will be happy to support you with learning technology. There's also sessions out there through, sometimes Sage has them, Edmonton Public Libraries. There are often sessions or volunteers willing to walk you through technology if that's something that you're wanting to learn. But start with something you know. Start with a phone. You could call a friend, call a family member. This is a way for you to connect with people outside of your building. If you're connecting with a tablet or computer, even today, if you are, you can see that there's opportunity for visual and being able to see the people you're talking to. Staff in congregate living understand the great importance of connecting with family or friends, and they want to help with that. In GEF and across several seniors housing organizations in the city, recently throughout the pandemic have adopted programs like uh, family video chats. And so we recently have purchased tablets at GEF so that people could chat with their families virtually and be able to see them and hear them, which gives you a different experience than the phone. It really does. The era that we're living in demands that we use more technology and embrace it. But the climate of the pandemic itself also is doing that to everybody. We are doing this. We're doing a forum by our computers and tablets and phones rather than seeing each other in person. And that's a new experience for a lot of us, myself included. So everything around us is encouraging us to embrace technology and try it. Try to use it in ways where you could connect. Which also leads me to my next slide, which talks about connecting outside of your congregate living setting. Using technology is going to be vital in some of these areas. There are plenty of opportunities outside of your congregate living, and that doesn't mean that you necessarily have to leave. I know that you want to stay safe and you want to be protecting your health right now. So, using technology to connect to these things is going to be crucial. One of the examples I have here is Senior Center Without Walls, which is an organization that I love promoting because I think it's so cool. If you haven't heard of Senior Center Without Walls, it's basically like a senior center that provides programming and activities, but it isn't in a building. It's done through phone or tablet or computer. And you connect to things similar to the way you've connected today, where you can call in and be a part of a forum. You could be a part of an activity. And this is a way where you can stay safely in your home and still communicate with people who are interested in something like you. They do programs anywhere from exercises to armchair travel to Bingo, I think they do too. It's really cool to see that people can engage in that way, even over the phone. So if that's something that you're interested in, I am confident that Sage would have opportunities for that and information following these sessions. Um, and that might be something beneficial to you if you're living in a congregate setting that has minimal activities going on right now. Sage obviously is another great resource. Excuse me. Um, Currently, Sage has a lot of opportunities virtually where you can connect through phone calls. Similar to this, there might be information sessions or there might be programs and activities. Your local schools, Edmonton Public Library, these are places that are trying to get engaged in safe ways with seniors right now, especially with the pandemic. They recognize that seniors are getting isolated more than anybody. And so they're trying to reach out and do things to support. Local schools are often doing things like pen pal programs where you could write letters back and forth with a student and engage in that way, which is a way that also actually kind of feels like giving back as well, because this is an experience not just for you, but for the student as well to gain some experience speaking with someone older, wiser, and it's an opportunity for them, but it's also an opportunity for you. Edmonton Public Libraries, I know, are willing to come out and do library programs in buildings. So they come out and they bring a number of books that you can choose from. And this is a way for you to meet people outside of your community from the library. And maybe when you're coming down for a book, you meet somebody else who also is interested in reading and you strike up a conversation. It's a great way to see other people in your building, but also connect with something outside of your site. Ultimately, connection is vital. I think the last thing I would leave you with is no matter what way you choose to engage or what way you try to connect, it's important that you do so. The times that we're living in bring about a lot of isolation. And that's for almost everybody who is trying to stay safe right now during the pandemic. But we also know that we are social beings. Humans need interaction. And that might be a different level for you than somebody else. And it might be a different way for you than somebody else. But I encourage you to think about some of the types of activities and types of strategies that I spoke about and find what brings you the most joy and you the most satisfaction and see if that's something that you can do in your congregate living site. And remember, if something I talked about isn't at your site, talk to a staff member and see if there's opportunity for it to start. That is all for me. So I am going to turn it back over to Amber, I believe,
Yeah,
and
thank you so much.
we'll do questions.
Absolutely. So we're going to move into a time of question and answers. So if you're joining us through the computer, if you look at the very bottom of your Zoom toolbar, you'll see a little icon that says Q&A. And if you click on that, you can type any question that you would like to ask Shelby. Now, if you would prefer not to type out your full question, what you can just do is in that same Q&A feature, just type, I would like to ask a question. Myself or my co-host Laurel can unmute your mic and you can speak your question to Shelby. If you've joined us by phone, we have allowed your phone to call in and ask Shelby a question directly. You just have to press *6 on your phone.
Great. Amber, one of the first questions here, I think, is something that you will answer, actually. It's asking, is there access to a recording or transcript? And I'm assuming
Yes,
with regards to
absolutely.
the sessions.
For sure. So this has been recorded and it's going to, what we're going to do is over the next couple of weeks, we will be putting together kind of like a YouTube channel that will host the recorded sessions. And then we'll also connect with everybody who's participated. So when that goes live, you have access and links to all those.
I have a question here that's specific about living with GEF and income. So the question is in regards to why Sockhaw Terrace in Millwoods is the only building that would allow a higher level of income. When I spoke to about the two different housing programs and the affordable versus subsidized program, that kind of touched on this answer in a way. Subsidized programs across our organization are for people under a certain income threshold. So these are thresholds determined by the government as to what is deemed low income for seniors. And so we are required to follow those guidelines in regards to eligibility for subsidized housing. Unfortunately, majority of our housing is subsidized, and that's why Sockhaw Terrace and a couple others in the city are the only ones that are affordable. So we have affordable apartments in Sockhaw, Otwell in the south side around 50th Street, and also Roslyn Terrace around 137th Ave on the north side. And I understand that those are minimal options, but unfortunately, we have geared our organization mostly towards subsidized housing. Another question here says, for physical well-being, suggest kick balloon ball. Found balloon did not hurt if you were hit unexpectedly. Yes. This is a great activity. So the suggestion is, for physical activity, we talked about how it doesn't necessarily have to be straight exercise with weights, but it could be just a fun game. So this was kicking balloon balls. And so I've seen a lot of activities, variety using balloons, because it is an easy way to stay safe without risking getting bonked in the head or anywhere else. I've seen people do what they call fly swatter tennis, which is kind of giving seniors a kind of tennis racket type thing, and they're hitting around balloons. And so that's a great way as well to get some movement. And this attendee is right. It does not hurt if you suddenly get hit and you weren't expecting it. There is just another question here asking in regards to affordable residents. So asking, do you have plans to open any more affordable residents? And I assume particularly GEF. Not that I'm aware of. I know that we are in the works of adopting a couple more buildings in the new year, but I assume that they will be subsidized. And often our affordable buildings are ones that we build, and I've not seen plans for that recently. So unfortunately, our options are limited right now for affordable residents. I have another question in regards to GEF buildings. When is the Meadowlark residence scheduled to be built? So that building, so we do have a Meadowlark Lodge there currently, and that's been there for many years. With the open space behind it, this is on 156th Street and 87th Avenue. We have had plans to build what we were calling Elmwood. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to secure enough funds to finish that project yet, but I hope that it will happen in the future. I just don't know when.
All right. Well, I just want to thank you so much, Shelby, for being with us on a very early Saturday morning, giving your time and lending your wealth of experience to us. I appreciate that so very much. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your Saturday. Thank you to all of our attendees who came and who participated.